Hello, I'd like to welcome you to our Internet for All webinar series. My name is Arika Cox, and I'm a telecommunications policy analyst with the Office of Internet Connectivity and Growth at the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA. I will be your moderator for today. Today, we'll be providing information that eligible entities need to know to apply for the new Enabling Middle Mile Broadband Infrastructure Program, also known as Middle Mile. Our Middle Mile Program Director, Sarah Blue, will walk us through the applicant information portion of the Middle Mile Grant Program application. We'll then move into a Q&A session where Sarah and I will be joined by our colleagues at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, otherwise known as NIST. I will now turn it over to Sarah Blue.
Thank you, Arika. And I hope that this is coming across loud and clear. Coming to you live from Denver, Colorado today. And it's a little bit, we're going to get some thunderstorms. So that's why I've got the light on here. So it is a pleasure to be here. We're going to go over a couple of slides that many of you have seen before. And then we're going to dig into the meat. The goal here is to revisit what we're doing with the Middle Mile program, what you can expect over the next couple of months, and then dig into the meat. So on this first slide, just a reminder, today we're talking about the Middle Mile program. We've been allocated $1 billion. It's called technically the Enabling Middle Mile Broadband Infrastructure Program. And it's a program designed to expand middle mile infrastructure, reducing the costs of connecting unserved and underserved areas. So we'll flip over to the next slide, please. If you've been participating in any of these webinars, you've surely seen this slide as well. So it's a summary of everything that's going on. Again, $1 billion. We have a variety, many eligible entities who can apply for this program. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Examples of the use of funds include construction, improvement, acquisition of facilities and equipment. It includes engineering design, permitting, and work related to the projects. It includes your personnel costs and other costs that are necessary to complete the program activities. Down on the bottom here, you'll see the estimated timeline. We did go live with the NOFO on May 13th. We opened up the portal with an application. It's been busy. I've seen many applications already begun, and I think that that's good. It was a different format. We've created our own portal. You don't have to go to grants.gov or anything like that. Just go to internetforall.gov, go to the Enabling Middle Mile program, and you will see a button there that will take you to that portal. That is open, and we will be accepting applications through the end of the day on September 30th. And then the statute allows for the deployment of this program to be 5 years. We do allow for a 1-year extension, and we anticipate rolling awards to be announced no sooner than March 1st of next year. So next slide, please. Today, we're going to focus on the applicant information. You'll see here, if you've taken a look at the application, there's basically 3 buckets of data that we're looking for. There's information about the applicant, that's you. There's information about the project, and there's information about the budget. It's really important to us that you all feel comfortable applying for this program, particularly because we're doing this on a new platform. We want to encourage people to get their applications in. So the technical assistance that our team provides over the next couple of months will be primarily going over each section of this application to let you know what we're looking for, what we're asking for, how that ties into the NOFO as best as we can tell you. So again, today we'll talk about the applicant information. And then on July 13th, we'll be talking about the project. That includes the timeline, the tech part of it. And on August 10th, we'll be talking about the budget information. So again, please go to internetforall.gov and take a look at the webinars and sign up for these. Let's go on to the next slide, please. The applicant information is then also divided up into about 3 sections. There's the standard form 424. There's organizational details and capacity and required documents. And let's start talking about these things. Now, if you go to the internetforall.gov website and you go to the Enabling Middle Mile program, you will see there a couple of links. There's the link to the NOFO, there's a link to FAQs, that's where we're storing all of them. There's also a link to the application guidance document and a link to something called mmg.zip. That mmg.zip file contains all of the different attachments that you are required to complete for this program. It's not completely required because there's one or two in there that are optional if it's applicable to you. And the reason that I highlight that is because we have an example of the standard form 424 in this zip file. It looks exactly like any 424 that you've ever completed. We put it here because we'd encourage you to complete this 424 form on the side on your own. And then you'll see in the application, we've actually built this into the portal. So everything that you type into the regular 424, you will key into the portal system. And what we're going to do over the next couple of slides here is go through each of these questions, those that are required, and talk about them a little bit. So let's get into it. Oh, and before we do that, here's the mmg.zip file contents. There's the application checklist. That is a handy dandy little checklist of what the questions really look like. There's the form 424 that we talked about. There's the disclosure of lobbying activities. There's the CD 511. We have a very simple community anchor institution list template. We have a budget narrative template. We have a data submission specification template, detailed budget justification template, a pro forma template, as well as a table of funded project participants and unfunded collaborators. All of this is in there because we realize that each of these things might mean something different to everybody. And in order to review the applications most consistently and effectively, we have provided these templates, and we want you to use these templates when you submit your application. I'm also going to do a quick shout out. Please, please, please read the NOFO. Read it, talk about it with your coworkers, talk about it in front of the mirror. Make sure it's a big document and there's a lot in there. So read it, get all kinds of perspectives, understand everything that the NOFO is asking for. And when you're done reading it, and I would encourage you to read it every single week, read the application guidance. If you are anything like me, I don't read instructions. Don't be like Sarah. Read the application guidance. It's a big document. One of the reasons that it's so big is because we try very hard to go through each of these questions that we're going through in the application, and we're telling you what we're looking for, and we're trying to tie it back to the NOFO. It's also got screenshots. So if that's helpful for you, I hope it is helpful for you. Yes, please do that over and over and over. Use it as a cheat sheet, and then get to know this application checklist and all of these different documents. So with that, we'll go over to the next slide, please. This is the 424. Again, go to that zip file. You will see the 424 template. You can pull it up right now as I'm talking. And by the way, if we go through this really quickly, if you have questions, you want to come back to it, all of this content is being recorded. It will be available on our internetforall.gov website, as well as this material. So take your time, pull up the 424 yourself if you can right now. You will have to, what you see here highlighted in red, these are the fields that you will have to complete. These are the fields. You're not going to be able to get through our application portal without providing some kind of information in here. So questions 1 and 2, you're going to select application for type of submission, and this is going to be a new application for you. The date received is going to go in once the application is submitted. Going on to the applicant information, one of the things that we ask of you as an applicant is to register with sam.gov. And so the information that you put here in your legal name, in your employer tax ID number, in your UE number, your address, all of that should match your sam.gov registration. So let's go on to the next slide, please. This next red circle here, it's technically called field 8F. This is, I'll say two things here. On the one hand, very often we see the AOR, the authorized organizational representative information listed here, and you can put your AOR information here. There will also be a section at the end where we ask you to add your AOR. So if you do not want your AOR to be this person in 8F, feel free to put more of the day-to-day contact, somebody like a grants manager, the person who's in charge of the person who's like really herding all the cats to make sure that they have the financial documents from the financial people and all the engineering documents and the network drawings. If you want to put your day-to-day contact here, please do that. We're looking for the name, the phone number, and the email. We'll go on to the next slide, please. This question number 9 here, type of applicant, what I want to call out here is that this 424 form is a standard form. And so when you go to the dropdown for type of applicant, you will see options that do not align perfectly with the type of eligible entity in our middle mile program. Don't worry about that. Here in number 9, select the type of applicant that best describes what your company or your entity actually is. And then later on, we'll talk more about the types of eligible entities for the program itself. In question 10 here, you will complete National Telecommunications and Information Administration for the name of the federal agency. And Amanda, we will get to your question in a little bit. Number 12 here, the funding opportunity number, you will list NTIA-MMG-2022, and the title of this program is the Middle Mile Grant Program. So let's go to the next slide, please. In field 15, this is for you to have fun and indicate a descriptive title for your project. We don't have any rules here, just make it something that you'll be able to remember so that you can make it consistent throughout your application. We'll go on to the next slide, please. Question 16, on the congressional districts. What you will list here in A is the congressional district where your entity is located, as opposed to what you're going to list in part B, which is where your project is actually going to happen. And the reason that we want to know that is because we track all of these things so that we can communicate with stakeholders, your Congress people, to let them know who's doing what and where and why this is all a good thing. If you'd like a cheat sheet, because I don't know congressional districts off the top of my head, we've got a link over here on the left, this census.gov, that will help you determine the congressional districts. I want to call out here sections 17 and 18, the proposed project start and end date. The date that you're going to put in for start is when you anticipate you're going to begin, obviously, and the end date should be something within 5 years later, unless you're requesting an extension. Make sure that the start and end date align with the project timeline that you will talk about later on. That is something that will be cured if it is not. And then here in 18, the estimated funding. You'll complete here how much federal funding you're requesting, so on and so forth. I do want to call out this program income in F that right now, today, as you are completing your application, if you're forecasting that you are going to make an income off of this network sometime during the project timeline, you might want to put that there. Please note that with this 424 form that's been built into our system, it will be deducted from the amount of federal funding that you're requesting. This G field will automatically calculate how much funding is being asked of NTIA. Make sure here also in section 18 that the numbers you're indicating for how much federal funding you're requesting match what you've got later on in the budget documents, in the narrative and in the 424C and in your detailed budget justification. We will talk a lot more about the budget portion of this application on August 10th, if I remember correctly. These numbers must align or you will be asked to cure in initial curing right out of the gate. Question 19 here is interesting to me. There's this executive order 12372, and our program is subject to EO 12372. For that reason, I want to give you a little cheat here that unless you are a tribal government or native entity, you will be selecting A or B. That is to say, if you are a state or political subdivision, if you are a for-profit telco or ISP, if you're a co-op, if you're a nonprofit, you're going to select A or B. It's very possible that if you're a carrier doing business selling internet service, that the state is not going to review, so you'll probably select B. But the reason you will select A or B because our project is subject to EO 12372. And you must at least let the state know what it is that you're doing. And we've been talking about that. It's really important that we're all building the only way that we're going to make sure that every American has access to affordable and reliable high-speed internet is by working together. And so you're going to engage your state political subdivisions. And so you will select A if you've actually been, if you've been reviewed, or B if you have not. If you are a tribal government or native entity, you may select C, and that's the only case. I'm going to go back really quickly to 18F. Program income here is if you are forecasting in the next 5 years of deployment that you are going to make income off of this network, you may indicate that here. And please know that that income is going to be deducted from the federal amount of requesting that you've requested in A. And we're going to have a long Q&A session at the end of this. So we can take more questions. We want to make sure this is crystal clear to everybody. So let's go on to the next slide, please. If you are delinquent on any federal debt, please let us know, yes or no. I think that that's self-explanatory. This question 21 here is an I agree, which will be populated by the AOR within the portal. So we'll get to that. This AOR contact, we're looking for the name, title, the telephone number, and email, and then in the portal you will sign and date. Please understand that this AOR will be copied on every correspondence that we have. If there is any curing that needs to occur during the initial review, the AOR is going to get it. If the AOR is not responsive to the curing request, if you don't come back to us with the missing information in 7 days, your application is not eligible for further review. This AOR is somebody who is going to be responsive to the emails. All communications are going to the AOR. So make sure it's a big responsibility. So please make sure your AOR understands the magnitude of this job. And with that, let's go on to the next slide, please. So we just talked through how you will complete the Form 424. Like I said earlier, the 424 is built into our application portal. The idea, what we tried to do, the reason that we gave you the template on the side was that so when you go into the portal, you can very quickly input this information, make sure that it's correct, and move on to the next stage. So same questions that we just went over, that's what you're going to see here in the portal. Next slide, please. All right. Let's talk about a few more of the questions that you're going to see in the application. First, you're going to be asked the entity type. And over here on the right, you'll see all of the various entities who are eligible to apply for this program. We've got governmental entities, we've got industry, we've got nonprofits, and it can also be a partnership of 2 or more of these entities. So we're looking for that entity type in question number 1. We're also going to want to know who is the prime, if you are entering as a partnership, who is the primary on this? Obviously, if you are submitting an application on your own, it will default to you being the primary. But if you're submitting this application with a few other companies or governmental agencies or groups, excuse me, then you're going to want to indicate here who the primary is going to be. Question 3 here is about foreign entity, and it begins with a yes, no of the parent owner of you as the applicant, if it is a foreign entity, and if it is, to identify which country. You'll see later on in the application that we do get into more specifics about, and of course, right now I've forgotten, I think it's 47 CFR something, and we've got a tip to that. We've got a link to that, or at least a note to that later on in this deck. Later on, we will ask you more specifics. We want you to address how much foreign ownership, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but I want to call that out right here in question 3. We're just asking if your parent owner is a foreign entity, and if so, from which country. When you spend all of your hours and days and nights talking about the NOFO, reading the NOFO, practicing the NOFO, you will see that we really ask for a lot. There's a section on page 9 in the NOFO. We're calling it 3B, and it talks about all of these certifications that the assistant secretary is going to be looking for. There's financial certifications, there's managerial certifications, and I want to call that to your attention, because throughout the application, we're hitting on all of these points, and this upload managerial capability is one of those examples. We're not trying to be onerous or punitive with asking for all these certifications and qualifications and having a minimum threshold or anything like that. What we're doing, we've taken the input from a lot of other agencies. We've talked to a lot of people in industry. We've talked to a lot of members of the State Broadband Leaders Network. And we want to make sure that these applicants who are selected are capable of operating, of building, of managing this middle mile program. So here in question 4, we're looking for resumes of key personnel. That's not to say that you have to issue an RFQ right now to find out who your subcontractors are going to be. What we're looking for are the key personnel who are going to be making the decisions right now. That's what we're looking for in this question. And also make sure that these resumes, the names that you're listing and their capabilities, their experience, why these people are going to make sure that you've got the most formidable application possible, is because you're going to describe it in the organizational details narrative to clearly demonstrate the experience and qualifications. Let's go to the next slide, please. Here we are asking for the org charts detailing parent companies, subsidiaries, and affiliates. And then in question 6, this is the organizational details narrative that I just talked about. Everybody who you listed, whose resume you provided as key personnel, this is where you want to talk about their readiness to manage a network of this size and scope that that you are proposing. Here's the 47 CFR that I mentioned. We're looking for if you Google that 47 CFR, and I don't know how you say that squirrely little S looking thing, but if you look through those 1 through 7, depending on the type of entity that you are, you will see that there are different requirements regarding foreign ownership. So look at it, Google this 47 CFR, understand which one applies to you, and talk about it in your details narrative. So I stated that we're looking for the experience and qualifications of the key personnel. We want to understand your experience undertaking a project of similar size and scope. We want to understand as much as you can tell us recent and upcoming organizational changes and relevant organizational, thank you. Relevant organizational policies. I also want to call to your attention, for those of you who have not had the ability to look in the portal yet, you could say that we're pretty draconian in our narrative section. We are not looking for superfluous, fluffy, buzzy kinds of words about how pretty your network might be. We're looking for the actual, we want to know here in this question of organizational details, how are you as an applicant able to do this? Who do you have on board who's done something like this? Give us examples. This is very important. We are limiting you to the number of characters that you can put here. Tell us what are your organizational policies that might later on, like when you think about fair labor or workforce development or some of the other things that we're asking for in this application, you want to tie all that information in the most meaningful way possible into these narratives. So let's go over to the next slide, please. All right, required documents, there's just a couple in this first section. You will have to complete the CD 511. If you go to that MMG zip folder, there is a fillable 511 form. So it's one page, there's a bunch of text on top, and then you'll see there's yellow fields on the bottom. You just fill in your information, tab, 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 save it, and then upload it here in the required documents. The standard form LLL, this disclosure of lobbying activities, might not be required for you. So use it if you need to, don't if you don't. The SAM.gov registration, you do need to register with SAM.gov, and you will need to be current with SAM.gov. And you need to make sure that like we mentioned on the 424, the name and address and UE and employer tax ID number, whatever you put on the 424, that better match what you've got in the SAM.gov. Here at this point, we are asking you to upload a screenshot of your SAM.gov registration so that we can quickly validate all the information that you've told us. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, what you'll see as we go throughout these webinars is we're trying to give you a few examples of what you should really pay close attention to. What are some mistakes that we often see when we're reviewing applications? And so, for example, regarding the applicant portion, there might often be missing or incomplete forms. The purpose of initial is to determine the completeness and the eligibility of the application, including the responsiveness of the applicant. I encourage you, we talked about, go to page 9 of the NOFO and look at those 3B, all of the certifications that are being asked for. Also understand, read, I think it's on page 35 of the NOFO. It talks all about the initial review, what we're going to be looking for, these minimum threshold qualifications, including, for example, that you're going to support retail broadband, that you're going to provide a match. Those items are laid out very clearly in the NOFO. And I call that to your attention because if you don't have that information, your application might not be complete. So understand that, read that, make sure it gets somewhere in your application. So completeness of the application. If you don't have if you're missing a response on anything in the 424 or not providing the associated form, then that's something that often happens. What happens a ton is that the amount of funding being requested in field 18 of the 424 does not align later on to the 424C. I can't tell you enough times, make sure that what you're asking for on the 424 matches the 424C, matches the detailed budget justification and your budget narrative. The dollars need to match. That's most relevant here to the 424, but also the categories. Take a look at all these forms right now. Start thinking about what are my administrative, what are my engineering fees going to be. Make sure that you've got those subcategories and those amounts lined up on these different forms. Where I told you to be a little bit creative and have fun on the 424, thinking of the title of your application, make sure that that's what you put on your 511. That's why I would, you could have fun with it and be really creative and original, but make it something that you can remember. Some of the best practices, again, we provided these templates because we want you to use the templates where it's applicable. I think the only one that we went through so far today that might not be applicable would be that LLL form. Use our templates. You will be asked to use our templates if you don't when you submit your application. You won't get through the application with submitting something, and you should be using our templates. Additionally, let's see, here's a list of the documents that we just went through that you're going to be asked for in the application portion. So there's 424, there's all of the resumes, there's the org chart, there's the C to 511, maybe the LLL and the SAM.gov registration. Those are all things that should be uploaded into the applicant portion of this application. Confirm that the required forms are signed and completed. At the end of the application, that person who we listed as the AOR is going to be asked to attest that each section looks correct, and then they will hit submit. So please encourage your AOR to take a good look at that. Make sure that your project name and budget information, we've talked about that, are consistent across all of the forms. Let's go on to the next slide, please. All right, additional resources. I can't emphasize enough. Go to internetforall.gov, look at the program. We've got there. We've got the NOFO, we've got FAQs, we've got the checklist, we've got that zip folder that has all of those documents. We've got the application guidance. It's there designed to help you with this application, to set you up to be as successful as possible. So please go and take a look. You've got until September 30th to send in these applications. There's no need to get it in anytime soon. So go familiarize yourself with all these things and keep attending these webinars. We're doing this one today. We've got, like I said, the project in a couple of weeks, and then we've got budget a few weeks after that. We will also be talking about climate resiliency and NEPA across all programs, because that's a big conversation. As much as we can help you understand as it relates to the middle mile program in particular, we will answer those questions. And we're also planning sometime, I think in the end of August, to talk about, to go through some of the really important FAQs that come across. So come join our webinars. If you can't attend live, then we'll have something recorded up there and you'll be able to review the content at your own leisure. Send your questions into middlemile@ntia.gov. We've got a phenomenal team supporting us who's making sure that these questions get responded to as quickly as possible. If you're not getting the answer that you're looking for, be that squeaky wheel and keep asking. That is what I would do. And I, like I said, I attend the webinars and keep reading the NOFO. Let's go on to the next slide, please. And so that's the end of this presentation on the applicant portion. I'd now like to hand it over to my colleague, Erika, who is going to bring us all on board. And we're going to talk about some Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah, for that presentation. We're now going to move into Q&A. So in addition to Sarah, I'd like to welcome Darren Olson and Ming Q. Darren and Ming are grants officers with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, our colleagues at NIST, and they're going to partner with Sarah today to answer your questions. Webinar participants, we're going to ask that you continue to enter your questions in the Q&A. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom, there's an actual Q&A function, not in the chat. We don't want to miss them, so please put them in the Q&A. We'll try to grab as many as we can and get through as many as we can, but due to sheer volume, if there's anything we're unable to answer, we're going to integrate in future webinars. You can check our website resources, and you can also use the email address that Sarah gave to you. So Sarah, Darren, and Ming, here we go. We've got tons of questions. I am either going to address them to you directly, or I'm going to throw them out there and you guys can grab them. So we're going to start with the first one is this application process, I'm going to throw this at Sarah. Is this application process a one-time shot, or are there going to be multiple rounds or opportunities to apply for the Middle Mile program?
That's a great question, Erika. Thank you. This is all of this money. I mean, the mission to bring high-speed and affordable internet to everybody, to get everybody online, to drive adoption, all of this is like a once-in-a-generation kind of thing. And specifically for the Middle Mile program, this $1 billion, it is our intent to go through these applications and start announcing them by March 1st. And this is going to be it. So we might come back to you if there's items that you need to cure in your application, but the application that you submit by September 30th is your chance. It's your turn to tell your story on how experienced you are, why there's this need, how you're going to do it. This is that one chance.
Thank you, Sarah. We've also got a lot of questions. You emphasized several times the importance of reading the NOFO, right? Read the NOFO, read the NOFO, read the NOFO. Folks also, though, are looking for information, whether it be on the Internet for All website. They also use resources like the FAQs. And so a question has come up that the last update for the FAQs looks like it was on June 6th. Will FAQs continually be updated during this process, or should they reach out to another source to answer those questions that aren't answered in the FAQ?
We will have our next round of FAQs out there very shortly. It's our goal. we want to make sure that we answer all these questions thoughtfully. They're very important. We want to make sure that that we enable you to respond with the best application that you can. So it did take a while to get these first couple of rounds out. We've got that first round that went out at the beginning of June. We'll have the next round out very shortly, and it's our hope to continue releasing FAQ responses about every 3 weeks. We will indicate on the FAQ list which ones are new so that you don't have to wonder. So I would encourage you to keep an eye on that. And honestly, if we're not answering your question, there are sometimes nuances that come in the questions. We're not going to be able to comment on how good your project sounds or anything like that, because this is a competitive program. But if we're not answering your question and we're not saying, no, I can't answer that, then keep asking away. This is really important. I encourage you to do that.
Thanks. All right, we've got some questions. You talked a little bit about the AOR and receipt of information. So I'm going to throw this to both Sarah, Darren, and Ming, whoever wants to answer, because we've got about 5 questions related to AOR. And I think the first one is, does that person have to be the same person that is identified in the entity SAM registration? Can it be a consultant? Can it be somebody that the entity hires to assist them? Are there restrictions for who can be identified as the AOR? That's the first piece. The second piece is, once the AOR is identified, there was reference to email communications going out. Is there a way to get those communications to other people in addition to the AOR? Whoever wants it.
Anybody who knows me knows that I've got a big mouth, so I will keep talking, and Ming and Darren, you step in, please, whenever you like. Regarding who the AOR is, I will let Darren or Ming comment on that if it has to be the same person who's listed in SAM.gov. Regarding whether or not other people can receive those messages, all I can tell you is that the AOR is going to be copied on every single correspondence. If you list another contact on the 424, like who's more of a day-to-day contact, we're going to put that person on the correspondence as well, but we are not going to send it. Like, I've seen cases where somebody asked, a consultant asked on behalf of the applicant, hey, what's going on? We will not communicate with anybody but the AOR who is listed on that application. So put somebody who you know is going to be able to keep an eye on the emails that come from NTIA, check your spam folder. Those 7 days after, like early October, when we begin initial review and we begin to reach out to you for curing, it's 7 days and that's it. This is the most important time in your application cycle. So that AOR should be keeping an eye on the emails. Darren or Ming, do you want to comment on whether or not the AOR needs to be the same person on SAM.gov?
Well, I want to kind of loop in something else based on what you said. The AOR should be somebody who is able to commit your organization or entity to a federal financial assistance award. So somebody within your applicant entity. You wouldn't want it to be a consultant or some kind of contractor or something like that. I don't believe there's a requirement that the AOR also be the identified person in SAM. But it should be somebody from your organization.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. So let's swivel now. There are a few questions coming in about eligibility. And I know, Sarah, you talked a little bit about it. Our past webinars talked about it. The NOFO talks about it in Section J, eligibility. But I think that there are still some questions on who is considered an eligible entity. For example, can a broadband provider apply or do they have to be a state entity? And then we're going to swivel after that. I'm going to get your answer on that, but then we're going to talk a little bit about partnerships, because there are some questions on eligibility of partnering if you're an eligible entity. So can you just maybe give us a summary, Sarah, again, and maybe point out where folks, if they have questions on whether or not they are eligible to apply, where they can get that information in the NOFO?
Yeah, it's very clearly in the front of the NOFO who all of the eligible entities are. I can totally understand why it might be a little bit confusing, because when we did the Consolidated Appropriations Act and the Broadband Infrastructure Grant, that was limited to a state or political subdivision who could apply for that program. And then we've got BEAD, the $45 billion that's going to states, and then states are going to turn around and grant it out. The Middle Mile program is open to states, political subdivisions of states. It's open to broadband providers. It's open to telco providers. It's open to ISPs. It's open to nonprofits. It's open to economic development groups. It's open to tribal governments, native entities. All of those are listed at the beginning of the NOFO, and we also had it here in the deck. But I think it's pretty clear. And if you have questions about your case in particular, then I encourage you to please send an email to middlemile@ntia.gov.
Thank you, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to emphasize for the folks that maybe joined us late, there are a few questions coming in. This webinar is about Middle Mile, right? So not the BEAD program or any other of the grant programs. Please check out our website for information on when those webinars will be. But this one here is about Middle Mile. So Sarah, let's talk a little bit more about eligibility. There are questions coming in regarding partnership. And I may throw this one actually to Darren and Ming in regards to information that needs to be submitted if an entity is partnering with another eligible entity. Required documentation such as Form CD 511 certification, SAM registrations, financial information, organizational information. Is that provided for all of the partners that are applying, or are they to designate a primary partner?
I will need to go back to the NOFO and double check that. I don't have an answer right off the top of my head.
Okay. So question like that, Sarah, go ahead. I'm sorry, did I interrupt?
Well, I will say, so I'll digress for just a second, that because this is a competitive program, we're not meeting with anybody, any organization, any eligible entity one-on-one. We are able to meet with large groups to talk about Middle Mile in general. And so yesterday I met with a group, and this question came up also. If there is a partnership that is formed of eligible entities, are the certifications and all the financial information, is that required for each of the eligible entities? And what I thought was the answer was that yes, we needed that information. And my thinking was that we're looking for eligible entities who have experience, who've got the back, who can do this. And that's how we would be able to tell all of that information. I also know that there's the table of funded participants that's going to be completed later on. And so my question is, why would somebody be listed as a partner if they didn't have that information? Why wouldn't you just put them in this table of funded participants? So that was what I thought was the answer. And as it ends up, we've got that question back into compliance just to make sure that that we're giving the right direction. So if we can put a little pin in that answer for a second, we are verifying what all is required of those who apply as a partnership. And part of it also will come to when we get to just for a little bit of context, in case nobody knew, we at NTIA do not have our own grants office. And so that's why NIST is here. They are the ones who do all the pre-award risk analysis for us. They are our grants office. And they are the ones who, those applicants who are selected, NIST is the one who will issue this, what's called the CD 450. And so that's something else that we will account for, is if it's a partnership who applies, is the CD 450 able to go to only the prime applicant, or would it go to the partners in the application? So if it's okay, I'd like to defer that question to an FAQ, and Ming, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think we need to get more clarification on that. I think it would be good to address an FAQ. I do want to mention, I think something you mentioned is kind of important, that, normally, we only award an award to a prime applicant, and we will not be awarding multiple awards to separate, partners. So I think that is part of the, at least from the grants perspective, that we will be issuing an award to a who will be responsible for the overall award of the execution.
Thank you, Ming. So that's one that I'm taking down as an FAQ then, is that if you apply as a partnership, the financials and the certifications, are they required only of the primary applicant or of all eligible entities in the partnership? Thank you, Rika.
Yep. Okay, so for other grant programs, for example, tribal program, a resolution needed to be submitted. Do you need to have a corporate motion or corporate resolution if you are a commercial entity in order to be able to file an application? I'm going to throw that to our NIST folks first.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I'll have to get back to the NOFO into and see if there's a requirement to submit a corporate resolution. I don't believe there was, but I'll have to double check in the NOFO.
Okay. So again, guys, check our FAQs because they are a work in progress. We'll continue, or I should say, continually be updated, right? It's not one and done. So as your questions come in, as we get more information, we'll continue to update the FAQs. Sarah, we're going to go back to EO 12372. You provided some guidance on those ABC, those 3 check boxes there. We've got a question basically saying, is it a requirement that we contact our state and let them know? And how do we find out whether or not the state wants to review our application?
You know what? You do need to let the state know what it is that you're planning to do. What I would do, where I would begin, is looking on our Broadband USA website, where we've got a list of the State Broadband Leaders Network, and for each state, a contact for that office. I would begin with that. If your state, because not all states have broadband offices, if you don't, and you're trying to find out how you would notify the state, reach out to us and we will help you. It is really important that you are, as you're designing, as you're thinking about where the unserved and underserved are located in your state or territory, as you think about making middle mile networks more resilient, you do need to let the state or territory know. So if you do not find the State Broadband Office on our SBLN site under Broadband USA, then please reach out to us and we will make sure that you have that information. That's really important.
Thanks, Sarah. So in terms of applying, we talked a little bit about partnerships. What if there are multiple public entities within the same county or same state? If they have 2 different project areas that overlap, can they still apply? That do not overlap, if I didn't say that. If they have 2 different project areas, but they're servicing the same general area, can they both still apply?
I think that's a hard question to answer because on the one hand, it sounds like competing bids, and I don't think that that's the intent of the question. When you read the note, I mean, one of the reasons for building middle mile is to build resilient networks. So if there's a point-to-point middle mile networks built somewhere and you want to build something that would make it diverse and resilient and more available, that's possible. So if these 2 projects complemented one another, maybe that's an option. But if they're just competing with one another, I'm not sure exactly what's being asked. I think that I would go back to thinking about when you read the NOFO, you have to commit to prioritize either connecting unserved and underserved, or to connecting non-contiguous trust lands, or to offering wholesale broadband service. And so I would begin there. And who is it that you're trying, which objective are you trying to prioritize with that application? And are these competing? I'm sorry if I can't answer that question better, but those are just some of the thoughts that go through my mind.
Thank you, Sarah. Now, if an applicant submits an application and then they receive funding from perhaps another program that they applied to prior to submitting this application, are they able to retract it without any sort of repercussion?
Go ahead, Darren, were you going to say something?
I was going to say if I understood the question right, they received an award under a different program and they want to retract that one or retract
the application to Middle Mile. Is there any concern with them retracting that application? I think we're getting toward the duplication of funds, right? And so can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, if it's still in the review stages, it's not a problem to retract your application. Once it's been committed and obligated, then you would request termination of the award if it came to that.
And I would say we love you. I mean, like there's a lot of money that's out there to get these things done. That's all that any of us want to do, is to make sure that all Americans can understand how to use the internet and have access to the internet and can afford the internet. And so apply for a lot of programs. And if you win something else, that's great. And we love you when you tell us these things. Like you're not going to be penalized for telling us, I won this other amount of money. I didn't want to put all my eggs into the NTIA basket, so I applied for a couple of different programs. Tell us, be transparent with us. Then you'll be on our Valentine's Day list.
Yeah, I was going to just add to Sarah and Darren kind of mentioned.
Sure.
So I mean, obviously, you're not allowed to have duplicate of funding for the same purpose and some project. However, as soon as you know that you receive another award, inform us immediately so that we know that you already got the award for the same project or duplicate or overlap projects, so that we can make a determination how to handle that the application. So I mean, there's no penalty per se that you apply for multiple awards of multiple programs, but let us know as soon as you receive the funding for other programs, so we know what to do with the application that you have with us.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. We have a question about applicants beginning work prior to grant award. And so if an eligible applicant is preparing to begin a project this month or prior to them applying, that actually impacts the project that they're proposing for the Middle Mile program. For example, they're already beginning their network design and engineering activities. Can those activities still be included in their application budget prior to them submitting? So the award won't be until after they've already begun these activities. How do they handle that? I'll throw it to both Sarah and Darren and Ming, all three of you.
So this is actually mentioned in the NOFO. It's on page 33. It talks about pre-award expenses. Basically, they're limited to $50,000, and it talks about it gives examples of different types of activities that you can claim for those pre-award expenses. So I would take a look at that in the NOFO.
Thank you. All right, let's see. Give me just 1 second to scroll through. We have tons of questions here. If an applicant, going back to notifying the state or working with the state broadband office, are you looking, the question reads as follows to us, are you looking for an acknowledgement that we were contacted by a grantee? This is from a state, a letter of support or something else. Our state office is trying to understand if we should be scrutinizing proposals, partnering with applicants, or something else. If they as a state have a question about their role in the process, can you talk a little bit about maybe what they should do or who they should contact?
Yeah, I think that that's a really good question. We're not trying to pass any burden onto the states by providing letters of support. And that's not a requirement for the application. But what I think about with that is, so timing wise, the Middle Mile program is going to be making awards March of next year. And then you're going to work with NIST and figure out, you'll get your budget information, get that all approved, and then start issuing things. And so you're going to be notified of your award, and you're going to begin procurement of your materials sometime next year. And this will all be probably during the same time that the states are developing their initial proposals for the BEAD program. So I think that it's very helpful that the states know what is going on, where applicants are determining right now that there's a need for middle mile network to be built, just so that when states go on later to build their own initial proposals, that they've got those in mind. So I leave it to the states, whatever works best for you. I do think that it's helpful for you to be aware of these proposals as they, as applicants come to you and let you know what they're doing. I would keep track of it. It's not a requirement. You don't have to. But I think it's good to know this is where my constituents believe that there's a need within the state.
Thank you, Sarah. Let's see. Eligible costs. We've got some questions coming up about monthly recurring cost or cost for leasing fiber, cost for IRUs. Can you talk a little bit about eligible expenses? I know it's laid out in the NOFO, but can we maybe address monthly recurring costs, leasing fiber, IRUs? Are those all considered eligible expenses?
I think that is going to actually come out as an FAQ pretty soon, at least specifically on IRUs, because I think it's for anybody who hasn't applied for a federal program before, it's a little bit daunting when you look at eligible expenses include and are not limited to, and then we list like 5 things, and you're like, but what about this? What about that? And you don't want to submit an application that might not be eligible. So to answer the question, IRUs are an eligible expense. I would bear in mind the period of performance, that we're not going to pay O&M. You shouldn't be asking for O&M to be covered on 20 years when this is only a 5-year period of performance, unless you're requesting a 1-year extension. That is my suggestion. Ming or Darren, do you have anything to add on that with regards to monthly OpEx, if they were rolled up or into an upfront payment over the period of performance?
I think you nailed it with the O&M not being an eligible expense, operations and maintenance. And the other ones, I hesitate to try to give a general answer. I think a lot of those are going to depend on what the specific request and conditions are. As far as like you said, not being able to claim the expenses beyond the period of performance. That's pretty much your constraint, is your period of performance to claim expenses.
And keep in mind too, I'm sorry, Ming, go ahead.
Well, I was going to just add to Darren, comment. Generally, the allowable expenses has to be incurred during the period of performance. Really depends on, sometimes it depends on the specific request and the justification explanation of the request. So we have to kind of see that case by case to make that determination. Sometimes I think they incur beyond the period of performance.
And this is my chance to do a shout out for the budget people. As much detail as you can tell us, like, how do these different costs break down? Like, tell us this. If you're doing construction, then tell us like per linear foot of material being required, or if you're digging, or if you're just building a tower, like break down those costs for us. If you're buying a service from somebody, then break down, here's the IRU portion of it, or here's the lease portion of it. Share all this information with us. And the other thing that I would keep in mind is that we're also going to be looking at the sustainability of your project. So if there's some kind of monthly OpEx that's ongoing beyond the 5 or 6 year period of performance, we're going to be looking for evidence from you in your pro forma that you've got revenues forecasted that you're going to be able to cover those costs down the road. So it does all kind of tie in together.
Thank you, guys. We've got a couple questions on projects covering multiple states. Can a project submission include or application include multiple states in one application? And then there's another question that I'm kind of gleaning out of that one, a second one that says, if you have different projects in different areas, do you submit one single application because you're the same entity proposing it, or do you submit multiple applications for each of those projects in those different areas?
I'll take that. What we tried to do was to make it easier for you as the applicant, whichever way you want to do it. Regarding the second part of that question, should you create one big mega project or should you create many projects? The portal system will allow you to create. We ran many use cases where we said, I am so-and-so and I'm building a network in this state and that state and that state, or I'm doing this county, that county, this county. So you can do it as multiple projects if you like, or you can do it as one. I can see the pros and cons to doing it both ways. And it does be, for example, it does become a little hairy or gnarly, like trying to keep track of all those costs. I mean, some of these budget forms, when you're accounting for many different projects, you need to make sure that your numbers are consistent. Like look over it over and over and over and over again, make sure that your numbers line up. I mean, it sounds simple, but it's the devil's really in the details. So that's kind of hard to do. By the same token, look at how it is. And this kind of answers the first part of the question, if multiple states can come together, look at how we're going to be evaluating these applications. We talked about it a little bit today. There's the initial review that's looking at the completeness and the eligibility and the responsiveness of the applicant. And then look on at what we're doing with merit review. We're going to have 3 merit reviewers evaluating all of the applications that come out of initial, and they're going to be looking at the project beneficiaries. There's actually a point allocation that's described in the NOFO that you get up to 60 points for project purpose and benefit beneficiaries. And then there's about 40 points, depending how much match, for example, you propose in this application, that you can get up to 40 points with the sustainability of the project. And then those applications who average at least 80 points and meet 2 of the 5 statutory criteria, those applications are going to be prioritized for the programmatic review. And that's what we at NTIA are going to be doing. And there's 8 criteria that we're going to take your average merit score, and then we're going to look at these 8 criteria, and those are the ones who are going to bubble to the top. So I would, when you're thinking about, should I create many small projects or should I create one monster project, I would take into account very seriously how it is that we're going to be evaluating and scoring at all of the factors that we're going to be looking at, and hopefully that will help you make the decision which way to apply. You can do either way. There's no harm in it, and it's open to you whichever way, but take a look at how we're going to be evaluating these applications.
Thank you, Sarah.
Mhm.
And I just want to pause here. We've got about 25 minutes or so left. Again, for those that are submitting questions, we have a lot coming in the chat. I mean, a lot. If we can't get to your question, one of a couple things I'm going to suggest, again, as Sarah mentioned earlier, go back, check the NOFO. Some of these questions are readily answered. I know it's a whole lot of information. It's a lot to read, but some of your questions may already be answered in the NOFO and or our website. The other thing is that we do have the email address that we'll give to you again before we break for the day. So don't get antsy. I promise we will do our best to get to as many as we can, and those we can't, we're not going to lose sight of them. We will find a way to get the answers to you, whether through future FAQs, future webinars. Okay. The NOFO states that NTIA expects to make awards under this program within the funding range of 5 million to 100 million. What if my project falls under 5 million? can I still apply and possibly be awarded?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Those are guidelines of 5 to 100 million. If you're asking for less or more, then we do go on to say we're looking, you will need to explain. But yeah, absolutely, all applications. But I do want to repeat, take a look at how we're going to be evaluating these proposals. And we've been talking to a lot of different organizations and encouraging partnerships. And maybe it doesn't need to be partnership in the sense of this NOFO where, like, 10 entities come together and there's one partnership. Maybe it's just that somebody's the lead applicant and then creates a bunch of funded participants on that table later on. But take a look at how we're going to be evaluating these applications. At the end of the day, once we get through programmatic, then the assistant secretary is going to make the recommendations to NIST which ones to award, and things will go in order of the scoring, but we will also have to account for geographic diversity and the size of the award. So yes, you can do more or less than 5 or 100 million. We do want some explanation, but please balance it with all of the things that we're going to be looking for in scoring in the merit and programmatic, and then thinking of the geographic and size diversity parts of this. I know it's really hard. It's a lot. And if you're newer to applying for federal programs, this is tricky. That's why we're spending this time over this summer to talk through each portion of this and to answer your questions as best as we can. So keep sending them in. Like, I would rather that I can do nothing except respond to middle mile questions that come in as FAQs all day long. It would be way better than sitting in meetings. No offense to my coworkers here. We want to answer your questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. A few questions coming in from utility providers, and I'll start with this one. If a utility is interested in applying for this grant to provide connectivity between utility offices and connecting their substations along the way, do they have to partner with a communications company, or would their application qualify if they applied on their own? So I guess the question may be, can an eligible entity apply? There seems to be maybe some confusion as to whether or not they have to be partnered with a traditional communications company.
Not at all. You don't have to do that. Keep in mind what you must accomplish with this middle mile program, but you are not required to partner with anybody.
As long as they are listed in Section J of the NOFO as an eligible entity, they are able to apply, right, Sarah?
Yes, thank goodness Arika is here, because when you ask me what eligible entities are, I'm like, look at the beginning of the NOFO, and Arika knows. She is the lawyer here.
No, Section J. Okay. Can you clarify? I'm going to throw this one to our friends at NIST, Darren and Ming. Can you talk a little bit about in-kind contributions? Do all in-kind contributions have to be associated with a federally assisted project? And can you talk a bit about examples of, define maybe what a federally assisted project is? So in-kind contributions, if you could maybe just talk to us a little bit about in-kind contributions and a little bit about federally assisted projects, maybe giving some examples for applicants to keep putting up in mind.
So your in-kind contributions will be part of the project, basically part of a line item in the budget. And it may be something like you're using personnel or you're using your own equipment to do part of your project, something like that. But it has to be directly related and involved with your project.
Okay. What about federally assisted projects?
I'm not sure what that is. Is that like for a federally assisted project? I'm not sure what the context is with that.
In the NOFO, we talk about federally assisted projects in reference to cost sharing or matching. I would suggest maybe, oh, Sarah, go ahead. Did you?
I wonder if that question is around whether or not, I have seen some people asking if like ARPA funds can be used to match.
Right.
Because there is the requirement, unless you're a tribal government or entity, you must match at least 30%. And a lot of people have been asking if ARPA funds, for example, are eligible match dollars for the program. Do you want to answer that, Darren?
So the short answer is no, you cannot use other federal funds as cost share.
Right.
The exceptions are some programs allow like 638 funds from tribes can be used, but typically the answer is no.
You know what, that also makes me think apropos of not match, but the definition, so another question that does pop up quite a bit is what are good projects? Can I do this or can I do that? And again, because it's a competitive program, we can't comment on how good your solution is, because they're all really good. We wish that we could fund all of them. But I will point out what's a little unique, I guess, to this middle mile program compared to what was done with BTOP, for example, is this middle mile program, we will not be funding connections to households or to community anchor institutions. And I want to make sure that that's clear. I think with BTOP, maybe construction to CAIs was covered in the program. The middle mile is that network which does not touch community anchor institutions or households. It's what connects those places to the internet backbone. We do ask you, if you're proposing to do fiber optics, that you commit to enabling interconnections anywhere that you're 1,000 feet from a community anchor institution, that you enable or you facilitate an interconnect to that CAI of, to make sure that speeds up and down 1 gig are possible. But we are not actually funding the connections to the households with this. We want you to go to our Broadband USA site again. I know I've talked about 2 different sites. There's the internetforall.gov site, and then there's our plain old regular NTIA site, which is called broadbandusa.gov. Take a look at that. Maybe it's .ntia.gov. I think if Macy will probably correct me in the chat, but there we've got a whole bunch of information. There's a link, there's a map there, so you can get a sense for, based on what had previously been reported to the FCC in the Form 477, where some of the unserved and underserved locations are. So while we are not funding the construction to the households, we do want you to take a look at who's unserved and who's underserved. We're also well aware of the fact that there's this new location data map that's coming out from the FCC. And there, we're going to be making decisions on this program before that data is completely available to us. But I do want to call out for any service providers who are connecting to households, please get that information into the FCC, so that the sooner that you can report that information to the FCC on a location by location basis, the better it is for all of us. The sooner we're going to be able to roll money out and make sure and make a difference, make sure that all Americans are connected. So I'll get off my soapbox.
Thanks, Sarah. We've got a question on the application. We're a quasi-governmental agency, or there's also a similar question from a nonprofit. What is your recommendation if something in the NOFO is not permitted under our enabling legislation or articles of incorporation if they're another type of entity? For example, if we're not permitted to obtain a letter of credit, are there alternatives like suggesting a bond or cash escrow? Or can we open these conversations with NTIA to understand what our options may be if something is asked for in the application, but we cannot provide it? I'm going to throw that one to Darren and Ming, or Sarah, if you want to jump in too.
I can say that, Darren, were you going to say something?
I was gonna say that may be something we have to discuss and put up in the FAQs at a future date.
That question has come up if a bond would be accepted, and we will, like Darren said, that will be out in the FAQs pretty shortly. The other thing that I want to call out, because I think it's possibly, if like I'm not a lifetime federal person, so when I read the NOFA the first 10 times, I didn't really understand this. The letter of credit, you don't have to have a letter of credit in order to apply. What you need is a commitment from a bank, or maybe in the, if we'll see where we end up with the bonds, but what this NOFO actually requires is a commitment from a bank that if you are awarded, that the bank will provide you with a letter of credit of not less than 25%. So I do want to make sure that that's clear, because I didn't catch that little nuance initially. I thought that everybody needed a letter of credit immediately, and that is not true. You just need a commitment from a bank that if you are awarded, that you will be able to get that letter of commitment from the bank.
Thank you, Sarah. Let's see. Guys, there's a lot of questions here. Panelists, if you see any, please grab them. Sarah, can you talk a little bit about, you had mentioned kind of the application and evaluation process earlier. There are several, this question came in and says, will NTIA contact the AOR in the event that an application is deficient? There's that 7 days, having 7 days to respond. If the applicant does not respond in 7 days, does that mean the end of that application, right? Will that application stop moving forward?
We will always circle back with you. We will be very firm in the 7 days. And everything that we ask for to be cured must be responded to in that 7 days. We will also, before any notice goes out, take a good look at what it is that we're evaluating to make sure that that everybody's getting the same chance for this program. So yes, you will be notified if you were deemed unresponsive in the initial curing, and that will be communicated to you. It might not be on day 8, because like I said, we're going to get the list of everybody who is non-responsive, and we want to make sure that we understand what happened, and then we will communicate that non-responsive applicants will no longer be continued for review.
Thank you, Sarah. Swiveling to the application in the portal, someone says that their application may have hundreds of documents when you count resumes, MOUs, letter of support, all of the requirements. Does the portal make it easy to submit those as a package, or are all of those documents going to have to be submitted individually? I'm guessing what I'm trying to glean from this is basically if you submit in the portal, right? The portal is going to guide you through how to upload and submit. Is that?
Yes. And we did. So I'll say this, that everywhere that there is a required upload field, everywhere that you need to upload something, it is, you do need to upload in that place. I realize it might be easier just to upload one big zip file with everything. We do require that you upload the resumes where the resumes are supposed to go, and that you upload the detailed budget where the detailed budget is supposed to go. We also, I think that we did a good job in making sure that more than one resume, for example, can be uploaded, but only one detailed budget justification per project can be uploaded. So to say that where there should be more than one file load allowed, I think that we did that correctly, and where you should be limited to one file upload, I think that we've done that correctly. I'll also say that I want to call out, when we ask for network route maps, we want them in shapefile format. And those are big file formats. So we tried to break the system by uploading like, well, I didn't do like terabytes or anything like that, but we did upload some of the largest shapefile formats that we could find of many different areas. And we were able to upload all of that. And then finally, I'll say that there is a section in required documents, and I can't remember if it's an application or not, but where it's just a regular, if you've got anything else that you want to upload it here. And that's where you could put, if you've got letters of commitment or MOUs or something like that from last mile service providers who want to work on this middle mile with you, that's where you're going to upload all that information. And I encourage you to keep doing that. We want to make sure that is part of the evaluation, is making sure that this middle mile network that's being proposed has last mile connections that people are interested in using. So yes, in that last case, there is a you can drag and drop, you can do it, choose the file, upload, whatever you want to do. But in that last case, for attaching MOUs or letters of commitment or letters of intent or something like that from last mile service providers, there's one place where you can do all that. So if that's in a zip file, go ahead and do that. But everywhere else where we ask for a particular file, please follow the rules and upload the attachment in those places.
Thank you, Sarah.
Mhm.
All right, we have come close to time. And so what I'd like to do is just give Sarah, Darren, and Ming a few, take about a minute or two, it's up to you. If there's one thing that you would like those that are on the webinar to walk away with as they're working on their applications, one piece of guidance or advice or something maybe that you think is important that didn't come up in today's questions that you want to answer today, I'm going to give you the floor now. And I'm going to start with Ming. Is there anything, what are your parting words for those on the webinar today?
Sure. Yep. I want to say thank you for all the participants joining us on this webinar. And one thing I would say is that, I think Sarah kind of emphasized it multiple times during the presentation and during the webinar. So I would say pay very close attention to the NOFO and follow the NOFO, to meet all the requirements, submit all the documents required. And also pay attention to the budgets and budget justifications when you guys preparing your budget. Make sure you provide enough detail to justify all the costs, and make sure all the costs are eligible based on the NOFO requirements. So and try to get a good application in and get it going.
Thank you, Ming. Darren?
Yeah, same thing. Just look through the NOFO. If you're having questions, pull open that NOFO. It answers a lot of them that we get. And if you can't find your answer there, check the FAQs. And then there's also that email address that Sarah had on the slideshow. You can send a question there. And if they don't know the answer, if it ends up being financial assistance related, they will touch base with us and we'll get back to you.
And that email, Sarah, correct, is middlemile@ntia.gov.
Yep, that's right.
And I did see something come in. Someone said that they had, a few folks, they've sent emails, they haven't got an answer back. Trust that we are working very diligently and very hard to respond to your questions. They are not being ignored. In some cases, we're doing some research to make sure that we get back to you with a detailed enough answer as we're able to. So please don't hesitate to email us and to check the website. And to our program director of Middle Mile, final parting words from Miss Sarah Blue.
Well, thank you, Erika, and thank you to Darren and Ming for helping today and making this happen. And thank you to everybody who's joined us and who might watch this in the future. This is my goal in this whole process is to make sure that, I hope we have 1,000 awesome applications, and my team's about to kill me for that. But that's really the intent here, is to walk through everything that we're going to be looking for in this application. So thank you for taking the time and showing the interest in attending the webinar today. I'm not going to say anything different from what I've already said. The NOFO it's a lot to get through. There's the commitment immediately that you have to make, that you are going to either serve unserved or underserved, or connecting non-contiguous trust lands, or providing wholesale service. And then later on, there's a whole bunch of applicant qualifications, including what's not there on 3B with all the certifications. And then near the end, on 35 or whatever it is, under initial review, where we list, for example, that you are going to build a middle mile network that's capable of supporting retail broadband service. Read through the NOFO. Don't just go start to end like that, but take some time in trying to understand the statutory purpose of this program, the prioritization of this program, how we're going to be evaluating, and the scores, so that when you put your narratives together, you can incorporate all of these points. It's we're asking for a lot. We're going to be spending more time in the future trying to address questions on the climate resiliency requirement that comes up. NOAA is going to be on with us, and they're going to provide us with some resources. But you've got a little bit of time here. Continue to attend the webinars, continue to extract the NOFO so that you understand what it is that we're looking for, and send us your questions. Just keep sending them in, and we're going to do everything that we can to get those back out to you. And thank you.
Perfect. So I'm going to give folks, before we close out, I want to give you time for those that have the chat window open. Thank you so much, Macy. She is our specialist of all things webinar, and she keeps us all in line and in order. She has posted for you the program page, the link to application guidance, the link to the application checklist and packet, as well as the NOFO. She's also put the link where the replay of this recording will be available by end of day after the holiday weekend on July 5th. So please make sure that you grab that info. We want to thank again Sarah, Darren, and Ming for taking time out of your day today to present and to answer questions. And to those potential applicants that are watching, we thank you. We're excited. You're hopefully just excited as we are. And we look forward to working with many of you in the future, because we all have the goal of bringing affordable and reliable high-speed internet to everyone in America. And so send us your questions, check our website, and we'll talk with you soon. Thank you.